What kind of man chooses to face the first dawn of a new year alone, knowing that one wrong step in the snow could erase him without a trace? That question hangs unspoken in the air as the storm tightens its grip on the high spine of the Rocky Mountains, where winter does not announce itself gently, but arrives like a sentence already passed. The blizzard has been raging since before daylight, turning the world into a white void where sky and earth blur together. Snow drives sideways, hard and sharp, carried by wind that screams through the passes like something alive and angry. Visibility shrinks to a few yards at best, and even that disappears in waves. Out here in these mountains of Colorado, the beginning of the year does not promise renewal. It offers only endurance. Caleb Whitmore moves through the storm with slow, deliberate steps, each one measured, each breath controlled. The snow reaches nearly to his knees, dragging at his legs, threatening to steal balance and strength with every stride. Slung over his shoulder are 3 rabbits, stiffening already in the cold, the result of hours spent stalking through drifts and frozen timber. He is tall but spare, his frame hardened by years of labor and hunger rather than comfort. His coat, sewn from old buffalo hide, is crusted with ice, the seams darkened by melt and refreeze. Frost clings to his beard and brows, whitening him until he seems carved from the storm itself. His face, when the wind shifts just enough to reveal it, tells its own story. The skin is weathered and tight, etched by cold and sun, but it is the scar that draws the eye. A long, pale line running diagonally across his cheek, cutting through beard and memory alike. It is not the kind of scar earned quickly. It speaks of violence, of survival paid for with pain. Caleb never touches it, never explains it. It belongs to a life he has sealed away, the same life that brought him here. Ahead, barely visible through the driving snow, the dark shape of his cabin presses against a granite cliff, half swallowed by drifts. He built it himself 12 years ago, choosing the rock face to shield one side from the worst of the wind. The door is thick, the windows small, practical rather than welcoming. There is nothing about the place meant to draw others in. That too was intentional. Inside, the cabin smells of smoke, leather, and dried meat. It is sparse but ordered. A rope bed stretched tight between wooden posts. A rough table scarred by knife marks and years of use. Shelves lined with jars of roots and berries. Bundles of dried herbs, strips of meat hanging near the ceiling where the warmth keeps them safe. Every object has a purpose. Nothing exists for comfort alone. Caleb drops the rabbits onto the table and shrugs out of his coat, hanging it near the fire where the ice begins to hiss and drip. He moves with the ease of habit, stoking the flames, setting water to heat, checking the latch on the door. Outside, the storm shows no sign of easing. The mountains groan under its weight. He has lived this way for 12 winters, long enough that the rhythm of survival has replaced the rhythm of life. He hunts, he eats, he sleeps. He repairs what breaks. He waits for storms to pass. Days blur together, marked only by weather and the slow depletion of supplies. The world beyond the ridges might as well be another country, another century. It was not always this way. Once, there were voices in his life, familiar and close. A father who taught him how to set a snare. A mother whose hands smelled of flower and pine. A brother who laughed too loudly and dreamed too big, buried now in a place Caleb never visits. And there was a woman, one he does not name even in his thoughts, who left behind an empty space that the mountains could not fill. Loss did not drive Caleb into the wilderness all at once. It wore him down, piece by piece, until isolation felt easier than hope. The new year arrives without ceremony. There is no toast, no prayer, no marking of time beyond the wind rattling the cabin walls. Caleb cleans his rifle by the fire, running an oiled cloth along the barrel, checking the mechanism with practiced precision. The weapon is as familiar to him as his own hands. Out here, it is not a symbol of violence, but of continuation. It means food. It means defense. It means another day. The storm intensifies, a sudden gust slamming into the cabin hard enough to make the walls shudder. Snow piles against the door, pressing, testing. Caleb listens, alert but unafraid. He has weathered worse. He always does. Then, beneath the howl of the wind, another sound breaks through. A dull thud. Then another. Irregular. Human. Caleb freezes, cloth still in his hand. He waits, listening, heart slowing rather than racing. Out here sounds lie. The wind can mimic almost anything. He tells himself that, even as the knock comes again, sharper this time, desperate. No one comes to this cabin by accident. He sets the rifle down slowly and rises, every sense sharpening. Years of solitude have not dulled his instincts. They have honed them. He moves toward the door, boots silent on the wooden floor, and rests his hand against the latch without opening it. Through the thick wood, the storm roars, but beneath it he hears something else now. Breathing, uneven and strained. For a moment, he considers stepping back, letting the storm take whatever has found him. It would be simpler, safer. The mountains make no demands beyond survival. People always do. But Caleb Whitmore does not open the door as a man seeking company or redemption. He opens it as a man who knows exactly what it costs to turn away. Cold explodes into the cabin as the door swings inward, along with snow, wind, and the fragile shapes of two figures collapsing toward the threshold. And in that instant, with the new year howling at his back and strangers at his feet, Caleb's carefully maintained distance from the rest of the world begins to crack. The wind does not loosen its grip when the door opens. It surges inside as if intent on claiming the cabin as well, scattering snow across the floor and stealing the warmth from the fire in a single breath. Caleb braces the door with his shoulder and drags the first woman across the threshold before she can collapse fully, her body light in his arms, too light for someone who should have survived the climb. The second stumbles after them, boots slipping on ice, fingers clawing at the door frame until Caleb pulls her in and slams the door shut. He drops the wooden bar into place, sealing the storm outside, and for a moment all three of them stand there breathing. The silence inside loud after the violence of the wind. The women are soaked through, their coats thin and stiff with ice. The younger one, Grace Holloway, has lost her hat somewhere on the mountain. Dark hair clings to her face, and her lips have turned a dangerous shade of blue. Her eyes struggle to focus, blinking slowly as if sleep is pulling her under. The older woman, Evelyn Brooks, leans against the wall, one hand pressed to her ankle, her jaw clenched tight against pain and cold. She is shaking harder than Grace, not just from the temperature, but from the knowledge that they came close to dying and may not yet be safe. Caleb does not ask questions. He sets to work with the same efficiency he uses when dressing game or mending a broken beam. He steers them toward the fire, strips off their frozen outer layers, and wraps them in spare blankets that smell faintly of smoke and pine. He pours hot water from the kettle into tin cups, adding a pinch of dried herbs. Grace's hands tremble so badly he has to steady the cup against her mouth until she can drink. Evelyn accepts hers with a nod, pride intact even as her body betrays her. Only when the color begins to return to their faces does Caleb step back, watching them with guarded eyes. Strangers mean complications. They mean questions, and questions lead to stories, and stories have a way of dragging the past back into the light. He has lived 12 years without needing to explain himself to anyone. He intends to keep it that way. Grace is the first to find her voice. It comes out hoarse, scraped raw by cold air. She thanks him, not once but twice, the words tumbling over each other with urgency, as if gratitude itself might keep him from changing his mind. Evelyn waits until her breathing steadies, then speaks more carefully, choosing each word as though it carries weight. She tells him their names, tells him they did not come looking for trouble, only shelter. She says the mountain left them no other choice. Caleb listens without interrupting, his face unreadable. When he finally gestures for them to continue, it is a small motion, barely noticeable, but it loosens something in Grace. The story spills out in uneven pieces. Pine Creek, a mining town that chews men up and leaves widows behind. Grace's husband crushed when a tunnel gave way, his death written off as bad luck and worse planning. Evelyn's husband stabbed in a card dispute, the kind that starts with whiskey and ends with blood. In both cases, the town turned cold afterward. Sympathy ran out. Rumors took its place. Two women without protectors became convenient targets for blame when supplies went missing and fear took hold. They swear they stole nothing. Caleb believes them before they finish saying it, not because of the words, but because he recognizes the shape of the truth. He has seen it before, this quiet desperation, this awareness that once a community decides who you are, nothing you do can change it. Pine Creek is not unique. Frontier towns rarely are. Evelyn shifts her weight and winces. Caleb kneels without comment, inspecting her ankle. It is swollen, the boot rubbed raw where ice has cut through leather. He binds it tightly, his hands firm but careful. The scar on his face pulls as he concentrates, a reminder that injuries have a way of staying with you longer than you expect. Evelyn watches him, measuring, then gives a short, humorless laugh. She says she knows the look of someone who has been hurt badly and lived through it. Caleb does not respond, but something in his posture stiffens, as if the words landed closer than she intended. They offer to work for their keep. Grace says she can cook, clean, sew. Evelyn says she can mend tools, organize stores, do whatever needs doing once the storm passes. They do not beg. They bargain, because pride is often the last thing left. Caleb shakes his head, not because he is kind, but because the weather has already decided for him. No one is going anywhere until it does. He tells them they can rest. Nothing more, nothing promised beyond the storm. Night falls early, thick and heavy. Outside, the blizzard shows no mercy, hurling itself against the cabin in relentless waves. Inside, the fire holds. Grace stirs a pot of rabbit stew with careful hands, moving slowly, as if afraid sudden motion might break the fragile permission she has been given. Evelyn sits at the table, repairing a torn seam with thread pulled from her own coat. Caleb eats in silence, watching them without appearing to, noting the way they move, the way they glance toward the door when the wind rises, as if expecting someone to come through it. When Grace finally speaks again, it is quieter this time. She asks how long he has lived up here. Caleb answers with a number, nothing else. 12 years. Evelyn's needle pauses. Grace looks at him with something like wonder, or maybe sadness. She says that must be lonely. Caleb shrugs. Loneliness implies absence. He has built his life around not noticing what is missing. Later, when the fire burns low and the storm refuses to ease, Caleb lays out bedrolls on opposite sides of the cabin. Distance maintained, boundaries clear. He keeps the rifle close. Trust is not given. It is earned, if at all. Still, as he lies awake listening to the wind and the uneven breathing of two women who should be dead but are not, a thought creeps in uninvited and unwelcome. He wonders what it will cost him to let them stay alive. The storm does not pass quickly. It settles into the mountains as if it intends to stay, packing the world outside the cabin into a hard, unmoving silence, broken only by wind and the distant crack of ice. By the second morning, the door is half buried, and the windows glow dimly with reflected white. There is nowhere to go, no path to follow, only the narrow space they now share, and the hours they must fill together. Caleb rises before dawn out of habit, stoking the fire and pulling on his boots. He pauses when he hears movement behind him. Grace is already awake, sitting upright in her blanket, watching the fire with the wary stillness of someone afraid to take up too much space. Evelyn sleeps fitfully, her injured ankle propped on a folded coat. Caleb steps outside long enough to check the weather, returning with snow clinging to his shoulders and the knowledge that nothing has changed. When he tells them the storm is holding, neither woman argues. They already know. The day finds its rhythm without discussion. Grace takes to the small hearth naturally, preparing what little they have into something warm and filling. She moves quietly, but there is confidence in her hands, a steadiness that comes from having once cared for more than just herself. Evelyn, despite the pain in her ankle, insists on being useful. She reorganizes the shelves, takes inventory, mends a broken strap on Caleb's pack with thread teased from old cloth. Caleb watches it happen with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant appreciation. His cabin has always been functional, but never shared. The presence of others changes the air inside it, softens the sharp edges he has lived with for years. Conversation comes in fragments. Small things at first, where they grew up, what winters were like elsewhere. Grace speaks of hills instead of mountains, of seasons that did not try to kill you outright. Evelyn talks about Pine Creek before it turned on them, about the way towns pretend to care until fear gives them permission not to. Caleb offers little in return, answering questions with facts stripped of emotion. He does not lie. He simply leaves most of the truth untouched. As the hours stretch, the tension eases. The cabin grows warmer, not just from the fire, but from movement and sound. Grace hums softly while she works, almost without realizing it. Evelyn teases Caleb once about the severity of his silence, calling it impressive rather than rude. He does not smile, but the corner of his mouth tightens, and she notices. It is enough. That afternoon, while Caleb is repairing a loose beam near the ceiling, Grace slips on a patch of melted snow near the door. He reacts without thinking, dropping the hammer and reaching out to steady her. His hand closes around her arm, firm, protective. For a moment, neither of them moves. Grace looks up at him, her breath caught, her eyes wide, not with fear, but surprise. Caleb feels the heat of her through the wool, feels something else stir beneath the scar tissue of his chest, something he thought the mountains had taken from him for good. He releases her too quickly, mutters something that might be an apology, and turns back to his work. Grace does not comment, but the air between them has shifted, charged with an awareness that did not exist before. That evening, as the storm deepens again, Grace pulls a small object from her pack. It is a wooden flute, worn smooth by years of use. She hesitates, glancing at Caleb as if asking permission without words. He nods once. The sound that fills the cabin is soft at first, tentative, then stronger. The melody is simple, unadorned, carrying more feeling than technique. It speaks of longing without naming it, of roads not taken and warmth remembered. Evelyn closes her eyes, letting the music carry her somewhere safer. Caleb sits rigid at first, then slowly, almost against his will, his shoulders ease. The notes slip past his defenses, settling into places he has kept locked away. For the first time in years, the cabin feels like more than a shelter. It feels like a place where something might grow. Night after night, the storm holds them together. Caleb continues to hunt when the weather allows, bringing back what he can, his tracks swallowed by fresh snow each time. Grace cleans and cooks, stretching meager supplies with quiet ingenuity. Evelyn's ankle slowly improves, though she hides the worst of the pain, refusing to be a burden. They do not speak of what happens next. The present is demanding enough. Yet beneath the routines, unspoken wounds surface. Grace wakes from dreams she will not describe, her breath shallow, eyes haunted. Evelyn grows quiet at odd moments, staring into the fire as if seeing faces there. Caleb listens, even when no one speaks. He understands more than he admits. Loss recognizes loss. Isolation speaks its own language. On the third day, the wind eases slightly, enough that the silence outside feels unnatural, waiting. Caleb steps to the window, scanning the white expanse. Something has changed, though he cannot yet name it. When he turns back, Grace is watching him, her expression open in a way that makes his chest tighten. She thanks him again, more softly this time, not just for the shelter, but for not asking them to leave. Caleb starts to shrug it off, then stops. He says it was the storm's doing. Grace shakes her head. She knows better. That night, as they settle into their places by the fire, Caleb realizes the truth he has been avoiding. The mountains did not bring these women to his door by accident, and if the storm ever does release them, whatever waits beyond it will demand more from him than endurance. It will demand a choice. The sound reaches Caleb before he sees anything. Hooves striking frozen ground, uneven, distant, but unmistakable. It cuts through the thinning wind like a blade, sharp enough to pull him fully awake from the fragile calm that has settled over the cabin. He stands still, listening, counting. More than one rider. Coming from the south, from the direction of Pine Creek. The storm may be loosening its hold, but the world beyond the mountains has found them at last. Grace sees the change in his face before he speaks. Evelyn does not ask questions. She is already pulling on her boots, jaw set, eyes clear. Caleb moves to the door and peers through a narrow gap, careful not to silhouette himself. The riders emerge slowly from the white, dark shapes against the snow, coats flapping, rifles visible. They do not look lost. They look determined. By the time the first knock comes, heavy and deliberate, Caleb has made his decision. He opens the door just enough to be seen, the rifle resting openly in his hands. The men outside do not bother with pleasantries. Their leader speaks with the flat authority of someone used to being obeyed, accusing Grace and Evelyn of theft, of fleeing justice, of hiding like animals. He demands they be handed over. Behind him, the others watch the cabin with hungry eyes, already imagining how this will end. Caleb's voice is calm when he answers, colder than the air around them. He says they are not welcome. He says the women are staying. When the man laughs and steps forward, Caleb fires a single shot into the snow at his feet. The sound cracks through the valley, echoing off stone. The laughter stops. Threats replace it, ugly and loud. The riders promise they will return with more men, with warrants that mean nothing this far from town, with fire if they have to. They turn away slowly, confident in their numbers and their certainty that no one escapes forever. Inside the cabin, the silence afterward is heavier than the storm ever was. Grace's hands are shaking, though she tries to hide it. Evelyn swears softly under her breath, not in fear, but in fury. Caleb bars the door and turns to face them. There is no pretense left now. The danger is real, immediate, and it is his fault as much as anyone's. He tells them what he knows about Pine Creek men, about how far they will go once pride is wounded. He does not apologize. He does not retreat from the choice he has made. They do not argue. Grace meets his gaze and says they did not run all this way to surrender now. Evelyn nods, already asking about routes, about places to hide. It is decided quickly, the way decisions often are when survival is on the line. Caleb knows a cave system deeper in the mountains, stocked with old supplies, difficult to reach and easy to defend. If they stay, the men will come back in force. If they move now, they might stay ahead of them. They leave before dawn, packing only what they can carry. Caleb erases their tracks as best he can, dragging branches behind them, leading false trails toward a ravine. He builds a small fire at an abandoned hunting camp and lets it smoke heavily, a signal meant to mislead. The climb is brutal. Snow slows every step, and Evelyn's injured ankle turns the ascent into a test of will. She refuses help at first, teeth clenched, then finally allows Grace to take part of her load. Caleb watches both women closely, respect growing alongside concern. The cave mouth is narrow, hidden behind a curtain of ice and rock. Inside, the air is still and cold, but there is shelter, darkness, and the faint smell of old smoke. Caleb lights a lantern and leads them deeper, past stored supplies wrapped carefully against damp. For a moment, it feels like they have outrun the danger. That illusion does not last. By midday, voices echo faintly through the stone. The men have found the false trail, followed it just far enough to realize the trick, then doubled back. Smoke begins to seep into the cave entrance, thin at first, then thicker. They are being flushed out. Grace coughs, eyes burning. Evelyn grips Caleb's arm, her face pale but resolute. He tells them there is another way, a narrow passage he has never used, but it is their only chance. The crawl is agony. The tunnel is tight, unforgiving, scraping skin and cloth alike. Evelyn's ankle catches repeatedly, pain flashing across her face, but she does not stop. She refuses to be the reason they fail. When they finally emerge into open air on the far side of the ridge, there is no time to rest. Shouts rise behind them. A shot rings out, close enough that the sound punches the breath from Grace's lungs. They run until running is no longer possible, then turn and take cover among rocks and trees. The fight is short and vicious. Caleb fires with precision, conserving ammunition. Grace, shaking but determined, takes the rifle he hands her and fires when he tells her to. Each shot an act of defiance she did not know she was capable of. Evelyn reloads, passes ammunition, her fear sharpened into focus. Still, they are outnumbered. The men advance, confident, relentless. Just as the last of their ammunition runs low and the space between them closes, another sound cuts through the chaos. More gunfire, heavier, coming from above. The Pine Creek men scatter as figures appear along the ridge, rifles flashing. The newcomers move with practiced coordination, driving the attackers back until they retreat in disarray. At their head is Nathan Cole, a trapper Caleb knows by reputation if not by name. He does not ask questions. He does not lecture. He simply ensures the threat is gone. As the echoes fade, Caleb lowers his rifle, chest heaving. Grace leans against him, spent. Evelyn sinks to the snow, laughing once, sharp and breathless. The mountains stand silent around them, indifferent witnesses to bloodshed and mercy alike. Freedom has been won, but at a cost that cannot yet be measured. The mountains fall quiet after the gunfire, not in relief, but in the same cold indifference they have always shown. Snow drifts slowly back into the footprints and shell marks, softening the evidence of violence as if erasing a mistake. Caleb Whitmore stands where the fight ended, rifle lowered, breath burning in his chest, the familiar weight of survival settling back onto his shoulders. He has lived through moments like this before, moments when death brushed close enough to leave its scent behind. What is different now is not the danger, but the presence of two lives bound to his own. Nathan Cole approaches without hurry, his men spreading out to make sure the Pine Creek riders are truly gone. He studies Caleb's face for a moment. The scar, the exhaustion, the way his eyes keep returning to Grace and Evelyn as if checking they are still there. Nathan says Pine Creek has finally overreached itself. Too many accusations, too much violence. Word travels fast in the mountains, and some men do not like what they hear. There will be consequences this time. The law may move slowly, but it does move. Caleb listens, absorbing the words without celebrating them. Justice has never felt reliable to him. What matters is that the threat is gone, at least for now. They make camp before nightfall, sheltered by rock and trees. A fire is lit, small and careful. Grace's hands still tremble when she wraps them around a tin cup, though the worst of the shock has passed. Evelyn's ankle is swollen again, the injury reopened by the climb and the crawl. But she waves away concern with stubborn resolve. Pain, she says, is temporary. Being hunted is worse. Caleb watches them both, a quiet heaviness settling over him. He understands now that the choice he made at his door has set everything else in motion. There is no path back to the life he lived before. By morning, the weather has shifted. The sky clears to a hard blue, and sunlight glints off the snow with blinding intensity. Nathan and his men prepare to leave, offering to escort Grace and Evelyn down to safer ground. The offer hangs in the air, reasonable and clean. It would end this chapter neatly. Caleb feels the pull of it, the old instinct to step back, to let others take over. But when he looks at Grace, at the quiet strength in her posture despite everything, and at Evelyn, whose eyes miss nothing, he realizes how empty that solution feels. Grace speaks first. She says Pine Creek will never truly be safe for them, not even if the law intervenes. Memories have long shadows. Evelyn agrees. She has no desire to trade one kind of fear for another. Then, almost reluctantly, they look to Caleb, waiting. He feels the weight of their expectation, and beneath it, something else. Possibility. Caleb tells Nathan they will return to the cabin. Not because it is easy, but because it is theirs now. Nathan studies him for a long moment, then nods. He says some places are worth defending, especially when they are built with honest hands. He leaves them with extra supplies and a promise to keep watch from afar. When the trappers disappear into the trees, the world feels suddenly smaller, more intimate, as if the mountains have closed ranks around the three of them. The journey back is slow, marked by caution and care. They take a different route, higher and longer, avoiding open ground. When the cabin finally comes into view, half buried but standing, Grace lets out a breath she did not realize she was holding. Evelyn rests a hand against the door frame once they are inside, grounding herself. The cabin welcomes them back with silence and the faint scent of smoke, unchanged and yet utterly transformed. Days pass. Repairs are made. Evelyn's ankle heals properly this time. Grace settles into the rhythms she has already begun to shape, her presence turning routine into something that feels shared rather than endured. Caleb finds himself speaking more without realizing it, telling fragments of stories he never intended to tell, about his brother, about the fight that left the scar on his face, about the woman who left when grief made him unrecognizable. Grace listens without trying to fix anything. Evelyn listens with a knowing stillness that makes room for truth. The decision comes quietly, without ceremony. One evening, as the fire burns low and the wind hums outside instead of howling, Caleb speaks the words that have been forming slowly, inevitably. He tells them he does not want to be alone anymore. He tells them he cannot promise safety, only honesty and effort and a place to stand together. He asks them to stay, not as guests, not as obligations, but as family. The word feels heavy and fragile on his tongue. Grace's answer is simple. She says yes, tears bright in her eyes, not because she needs him to survive, but because she wants to choose something instead of running from it. Evelyn follows, her voice steady, practical even in its emotion. She says families are built, not inherited, and this one has already been tested by winter and blood. Caleb feels the weight he has carried for 12 years shift, not disappear, but redistribute itself into something he can bear. Spring does not come quickly in the Rockies, but when it does, it comes with purpose. Snow retreats from the lower slopes. Streams swell and sing. The cabin becomes a place others begin to find, drawn by rumor and need. Lost men, wounded souls, people looking for a second beginning. Grace welcomes them with quiet warmth. Evelyn organizes, plans, anchors. Caleb stands at the edge of it all, scarred, weathered, no longer hiding. The man who once believed survival was enough now understands what survives. Winter is not just flesh and bone, but choice. And in choosing, he has finally stepped out of exile and into a future he once believed was never meant for him. In the end, the mountains did not change. They remained cold, demanding, and indifferent to human hope. What changed was the man who stood within them. Caleb Whitmore began the year believing endurance was the same as living, that solitude was safer than loss, and that the past could be buried deep enough to stay silent. The storm challenged that belief. So did two women who refused to disappear quietly into the snow. Grace brought warmth where there had only been habit. Evelyn brought strength where there had only been restraint. Together, they forced Caleb to confront the truth he had avoided for years, that survival without connection is only a slower kind of death. Violence followed, as it always does when fear is given power, but so did courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand ground even when retreat would have been easier. What survived the winter was not just a cabin, or even 3 lives, but a decision. To stay, to protect, to build something where nothing was promised. In the hush after the storm, among scars that never faded and losses that were never erased, a family was chosen. And sometimes, that choice is the bravest act of all. End of article. Good night.